So we're getting close to the point where we have Sam ready to come on and ready to talk. Sam's got this really interesting profile, and he's an author with a number of books. But I love the fact that he's described as a data storyteller, and he's going to be our first keynote address of our 2022 conference. In this time when data is important, where we can be inundated with data. We haven't got a problem about generating data in the world these days. We have got a problem about translating data into information. And we have got a problem about trying to make sure that those people who need to know what data is out there know about it, so know how to access it. And data is power. And that's what we need. Information is greater power, however. And what Sam has made his career on is how to get this position to advise companies on the smarter use of data. So not just having it, but how to use it and how best to communicate it. Communication is all in our world today because we rely a lot of online visits and means of contacting people, phone calls, slightly fewer face-to-face things. But even on face-to-face, that communication, that ability to establish a relationship, to make a link, means that the people are listened to. If you can get that little link there, if you can get people to listen to you, you've got much greater opportunity to forge a meaningful relationship and a meaningful collaboration. So he also really pushes a point about how to ask smarter questions to get the data you need to create real insights. So we got Sam ready to come on and talk to us today, and he is ready. We're a little bit early to do that, and I'll just check whether Sam is available and ready. There's Sam. That's good. I hope that was a reasonable description of you, Sam, and we're very, very pleased and honoured to have you as our keynote speaker to talk to us today on the 6th of October for our Doing Business Brilliantly conference.
Well, thank you so much, Paddy, for that. I mean, I don't know if you can see in the light in this room, but I'm blushing over here. So thank you very much indeed for that splendid introduction. And thank you also for setting the context. So over the next hour or so, I want to talk to you very much about communication, but the role, as you say, Paddy, that data can play in communication. As you say, there's no business, I think, out there that says we haven't got enough data. There's no sense at all of people not having enough. I think there's quite a sense of how do we wade our way through that data to find the corner, if you like, of big little data, as I like to call it, the corner of data that's going to allow us to really understand our customers, our prospects, our competitors, our colleagues. How are we going to turn data into insight? Insight, as you say, it's a profound and useful understanding of the ecosystems in which we operate. Profound and useful because it's profound. It allows us to say, so what? This is what the data means. And then now what? This is what we should do as a result. So what I'm going to be talking to you today, the title, you can see my slides, title of this session, interactive session, very much an interactive session, is going to be using data better to deliver this successful business presence in whatever media you're operating, online, offline, in person, on your website, wherever that may be. Now, I join you from the People's Republic of Sussex. Here I am. You thought you were getting a data storyteller, Paddy and Paula, but in fact, you're getting a buccaneer. Lewes, East Sussex, is this sleepy liberal town in almost on the south coast. And every November the 5th, it turns into from 15,000 people to 100,000 people. If any of you have ever been down here at Bonfire, you'll know some interesting things happen. Effigies of 30-foot tall effigies of people in the public eye who've done interesting and objectionable things in the past year are laced with fireworks and blown up. I put this up partly so that you can throw some mental rotten tomatoes at me, and also so I can tell you a tiny bit about how I've come to become a data storyteller. Also, please do feel to connect on LinkedIn. Be very happy to connect and to carry this conversation on afterwards. I started life as a classicist. So I was badly taught mathematics at school, in a state grammar school in Buckinghamshire. And so I did what I could do. And what I could do was Latin and Greek and ancient history. That's what I did for my A-levels, and that's what I did at university first time round. I worked in communications because I'd fallen in love with storytelling. The ancients, particularly the Greeks, were fantastic at both telling great stories, but also laying out the structure for stories, something we'll come back to in a little while. After about a dozen years, I felt that I had an itch I needed to scratch. I'd been reading a lot about psychology, and eventually found myself at the University of Sussex studying for a master's and then a doctorate in experimental psychology. I'd worked in London agencies and had given up living in London, sold a house in London, moved to Sussex, never to be able to afford to return. And imagine my shock and surprise in October 2000 when I discovered that the first 2 hours of my new life, and much of my new life, was a statistics lecture. Now, fortunately, I had amazing statistics teachers who taught me very quickly that statistics was just another language. Data was just another way of looking at and explaining the world in a rational, evidence-based way. So as well as Latin and Greek, which candidly I don't use very much in business these days, but also English and other languages, I suddenly had data analytics that I could use. And I massively overcompensated and invested in data analysis. And when I came out the other side, in 2004-05, data in communication was suddenly becoming important. Facebook had been born, Twitter was about to be born, and I had this tool, this ability through statistics to make sense of data. Nearly 9 years ago now, I started my own data storytelling consultancy, and have been running that happily down in Sussex since 2013. And what we do, as Paddy says, is to help organizations make better use, make smarter use of data. One other thing about me to tell you, to give you a slight sense of legitimacy, Paddy's mentioned the books. I'm a codifier. I like to write things down and then to share. And this keynote today is all about sharing the fruits of experience. What I found works incredibly well. So in 2018, I wrote a book about data storytelling called Narrative by Numbers. But you can't just tell stories with data unless you have genuine data-driven insights, profound and useful understanding. Second book, a pandemic baby, if you like, was called How to Be Insightful. Now, insightful thinking, the type of thinking that is creative and leads to innovation and that propels all of our businesses forward brilliantly. New product developments, new variants of products, totally new markets. That's different from analytical thinking. Analytical thinking is all about working away at a problem until we solve it. Insightful thinking is a different way of operating. But what I was convinced and what I discovered in researching and writing this book was that actually it is possible, it absolutely is possible to map out a regimented way of getting to greater insight using data. And then, Paddy, as you also say, questions, well, it all starts with questions. You can see, and I confess to this in this book, I wrote the books in the wrong order. Because if we ask smarter questions, if we have a way of asking questions that I'll go into in the first part of this talk, then candidly, we're very much going to be able to get the data we need that will allow us to articulate those insights, understand the market, and communicate in a way that those we seek to influence are going to want to hear. So it's all about questions. It's all about questions for data, for insight, for better storytelling, for this doing business brilliantly, using data better to deliver this successful business presence. But as you say, nobody ever says, I don't have enough data. So the 3 core sections, each of which is going to have some audience participation. The 3 core sections are looking at asking smarter questions. And I would encourage you to think about asking smarter questions as the key tool for helping you to scope the market that you're currently in, and indeed the markets that you can move into because of the innovations that you develop. And then I want to talk about sourcing genuine insights. And I think that insight is incredibly useful for understanding the market that we're in, our current and our prospective clients, our competitors, our colleagues. But this profound and useful understanding, it's a rare resource, but something that we really can thrive if we are able to get to insight. And then with the questions to the data, allowing us to tell better stories. Whether we're creating 15-second TikTok videos, whether we're writing a physical annual report, whether we're updating our social media content, whatever it might be, telling better stories, not dominated by data, but underpinned by data, allow us to attract and retain customers and ultimately turn them into our advocates who do our selling for us. In each one of those sections, there's going to be, I'm going to be asking you questions. And the best questions that are asked in each of those, or the best answers that you give, well, you know, there may well be some prizes on offer for you for the best answers given. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and I will be done. Well, I'll certainly be done by 10:30. But thank you so much for Paddy and Paula and Lucy for the generous allocation of time to go through these three really important, I believe, areas of using data better to deliver a successful business presence. So audience participation, mentioned that already. So let's start with asking smarter questions, the importance of asking smarter questions, and the type of approach that I think it's really wise for people to take and give better emphasis to asking questions. Now, many of you, I'm sure, will know the phrase garbage in, garbage out, particularly in the context of using data. Now, if you don't have clean data, if you don't have regimented data, if you don't have data that is going to help you, any amount of smart algorithms that stand between what goes in and what comes out are not going to enable you to make sense of your market, your customers, your competitors, your colleagues. The challenge with asking smarter questions, I think, is that you can flip this on its head. If you do ask genuinely smarter questions, then you can move from garbage in, garbage out to quality in, quality out. The trouble with questions is that, candidly, over many, many years, over the last 30, 40, 50 years, there hasn't been a primacy put on questions. There's been a primacy put on answers. It is, hence this little illustration here, it is something almost too trivial to contemplate, but I think it's time to change that. Now here, you may well have heard the phrase describing children as miniature scientists. Here we have a miniature scientist, this boy with his chemistry experiment here, looking what is going on in here. There's a book by an American journalist and academic called Warren Berger called A More Beautiful Question. And this book is all about one simple question, and it's the question, why? Now, anyone who's spent any time with any children up to the age of 5 will know that the question why is asked really rather often. Indeed, Warren Berger in his book quantifies it as 40,000 times. By the time children reach their 5th birthday, they've asked the question why 40,000 times, wherever they live in the world. And the reason is simple. As miniature scientists who have this amazing power of language that they develop, they want to find out how the world works. They want to work out what are known as the if and then contingencies, which are a uniquely human way of looking at and understanding the world. If I pull the cat's tail, will it scratch me or will it purr? If I put my sister's fingers behind the plug and turn on the socket and it goes boom, will I be sent to bed with my dinner or not? We want to understand what's going on in the world. Now, the challenge is that when we move from preschool, where we're indulged by parents, by nurseries, by relatives, by siblings, we're indulged with our why-type questions, suddenly the desirability of questions comes to a juddering halt. At least the person who's asking the questions. Suddenly, it's the teacher asking the questions and the pupil who is being asked to answer them. And we are validated by the answers that we give rather than the questions that we ask. Indeed, many, many times, because of issues of crowd control, because of issues of maybe big classes, because of curricula that are required to be got through for SATs at the end of primary school and then GCSEs and A-levels and beyond, there isn't time often to hear questions. And so 40,000 why-type questions by the age of 5, not the same number again until children are 18. And I think it's time that we changed it. We changed that because humans have what is known as the epistemophilic instinct. That means the search for knowledge, the love, the quest for knowledge. That was a phrase coined by the psychoanalyst Melanie Klein in the last century. We have this instinct to find out why. And it's that curiosity that drives all of your businesses, without doubt. What happens if we do this? Why does this happen? Why can't it be done in a different way? So asking smarter questions, absolutely. But it's not just about the what that we ask. It's also about the how that we ask. And if you'll indulge a minute's tune from my past, I'm just going to play you something that I think sums this up beautifully. I'm sorry, you'll indulge I hope, my going back on my school bus in Buckinghamshire. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That is what gets results. Now, think when you are preparing your questions, when you're preparing the way that you are going to ask questions, think about your physical appearance, the appearance of the room, whether it's a room on Hopin or Zoom or Teams or a physical room. Think about your demeanor, think about the attitude that you bring, consider the voice that you use. In writing my most recent book, I spoke to a lot of people who are involved in asking smarter questions as the fundamental premise of their job. I spoke to a Nobel Prize winning scientist, I spoke to police, I spoke to FBI hostage negotiator, conflict mediators, judges, barristers, solicitors, doctors, coaches, all sorts of people. The FBI hostage negotiator, Chris Voss, in his book, Never Split the Difference, he talks about the importance of using, in order to talk down hostage takers, the late night FM DJ voice. The think about how you modulate the questions that you ask. Do people feel attacked or do they feel supported in the questions that you ask? And then there's a really massively important part here, I think, about the assumptions that we make. I mentioned I was a classicist. Here's a bad pun for you. Socrates, he came from Greece. He had this thirst for knowledge. Here he is about to sip his hemlock and die for corrupting the youth of Athens. But he lived in febrile political times, not indeed terribly unlike the type of political times that we live in around the world today. But what Socrates did, or what Socrates is said to have said, because he didn't write anything down, nothing that survives anyway, it was all written in what you might think of as fan fiction by Plato. What Socrates said time and time again, when he was looking to understand something, he was looking to get to the understanding of what is courage, what is truth, what is beauty. What he started, his starting position is what's known as the Socratic paradox, and that was, all that I know is that I know nothing. Now, he wasn't ignorant, but he went to talk to people who were expert in, let's say, military strategy. Very applicable, absolutely, for business strategy. And what he did was, he would say, look, I don't know anything. What do you think? What do you think is the core definition of this? And the person he would talk to would say something, and he'd say, that's interesting. And then he'd ask another question, and the person would answer that, and they were an expert in this field. And Socrates went, you know what? Those two things don't marry up. One of them can't be true. And they then discard those definitions and build things from the base up. Now, what I'm not saying is that the business questions that you ask to get the data that you need to build the insights and tell the stories, of course, you're experienced, you're running businesses, you know a lot about logistics or IT or finance or whatever it might be. But if you start from a position that says, I don't know what the answer is going to be, and you park your assumptions, your prejudices, your biases at the door, you don't prejudge what the answer is going to be. And I think that's a really important principle to take, in any sales negotiation, because your client, your prospective client or customer, knows more about their market than you do. You know about the solutions that you can bring, be they products or services. But if you have that position of self-declared ignorance but willingness and readiness to learn, then you're very much more likely to succeed. Now, in 1974, a man called Stephen King wrote something. Not actually, this is Stephen King, the novelist. He wrote Carrie in 1974. I'm thinking about somebody else, another Stephen King. Stephen King, who was an advertising executive for the then biggest ad agency called J. Walter Thompson. And he created what he called a framework for planning. I'm not going to go through this in detail. And by the way, all of these slides will be available to you, even though most of them are pictures, they will be available to you afterwards. But what I want you to concentrate on here, and I'll blow this up and amplify it a bit more, is the 5 questions he believed that we need to ask in any brief. And I think this isn't just about advertising. I think this is about any type of business partnership that you're involved in. Where are we? Why are we there? Where could we be? How could we get there? And are we getting there? And I think if the ghost of Stephen King will allow me, I think I'm going to just add a couple of questions to that. So I think in terms of really any brief, the world's best briefing template, where are we now? Why are we there? Where could we be? How could we get there? Are we getting there to allow measurement? What's standing in our way? And because the world changes the whole time, what's changed recently? So I think that is potentially the world's best briefing template. And I would encourage you to screenshot this, to use this wherever you are, because I don't think there are very many more questions that you need. One of the things in advertising commercial communication that people are always saying is, oh, well, there's a new platform. TikTok's here now. What's our TikTok strategy going to be? I think that what's changed recently question allows us to say there are new routes to market, and also there are new technologies, and there are competitors who are doing new things. But I think that simple way of looking at the world, I say I'm a codifier, I'm a simplifier as well. That simple way of looking at the world can take you a very long way. Now, as I say, I spoke to a lot of people in writing this, and I think that there are 6 universal principles in asking smarter questions. The first is this curiosity, embracing your inner 5-year-old. You may know about an exercise that's very useful exercise called the 5 Whys. It was developed by Seiichi Toyoda, one of the creators of the Toyota car company. It's also known as the root cause analysis, but asking why. Why are you looking to do this now? Why is it a good time for you to work in this area? Why? But have specific why type questions. Open-mindedness is terribly important. This Socratic paradox of all that I know is I know nothing. That you don't come into an interrogation, a briefing session, a pitch session with I think I know what the solution is. I've done this a million times before. This is what you need. Because it might not be what they need. And indeed, clients can often, I know this is true in my business, and I know in many other people's businesses too, clients can often help us to co-create something amazing. We've got a technology, a way of doing things, an approach. The client has this need, we can create something new together. Preparation, I talked about that how checklist, so important to prepare, to imagine where the questions are going to take you, but not to prejudge the answer. Now, the police are very, very skilled and trained to a very high standard in preparing, but not preparing what the answer might be, preparing how the questions might go. Same with the legal profession too. Openness. Openness is different from open-mindedness. So open questions. There is a place for closed questions, but open questions, terribly useful. Now, just to go back to the police, I spoke to both the head of West Yorkshire Police, post Sutcliffe, post the Yorkshire Ripper, who turned that police force from being a police force that was in a very difficult situation, having arrested and interviewed him 9 times and not found him, and not prosecuted him, to the police force that was able to be the best at solving cold cases in the country. And one of the ways he did that was in the preparation, but in the way that they asked questions. And I also spoke to a couple of practicing detective sergeants. And one of, I think, the best question frameworks that they have is tell, explain, describe. They call it the TED way of questioning. Tell me about what you were doing on the night of Thursday the 15th. Could you explain how you felt when you walked in the pub? Describe to me in a bit more detail about what the man at the bar was doing. And then you just cycle through, tell, explain, describe. Open questions that encourage people to tell narratives. In a business relationship, when you're using questions to get to the heart of the matter in the brief, it's so important to be open and to allow your potential customers, your current customers who could grow, to tell you openly about what it is that is their pain, and then you can work out what the solution might be. Simplicity really matters. Absolutely, simplicity matters. Simplicity is so important. Not asking cluster questions, not asking what about this and that and the other, because, well, either they'll answer the easy one or the one they want to answer, just one at a time. And then the single most important thing of asking smarter questions is, I'm not buffering, it's silence and listening. So those, I think, are the 6 universal principles. I'd strongly encourage you to adopt those. And those are set out in this first book. Questions that come across. Some questions, rather than what do you do, and I'll come back to that in a second, rather than what do you do, it's much more what lights you up, how do you spend your time, what's it like being you? Think about asking questions that are not just going to say, well, I get up, I go to the office from 9 to 5. Think about what some of your heroes might be. I mean, it might be, what would Jesus, Kanye, Klopp, Beyonce, or Oprah, or Yoda do? They may be or may not be some of your heroes. But I think about putting yourself into the mindset, the shoes of others that you respect, others that have a profile. And indeed, the whole of this talk really, in terms of building a successful presence, is about empathy and understanding the pain. On a scale of, this is the Net Promoter Score question, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely is it you'd recommend this company to a friend or colleague? Thinking about what you can control and thinking about what you're grateful for. Those are very powerful questions, I think, that can really help to and to put you in a good position. How might we? There's a way of, as an innovation school called design thinking that begins with how might we. How might we is a brilliant way to start any briefing session with your team, to think, look, we've got this challenge, how might we? How is open, might, possibility, we, it's about co-creation. And then this is a really interesting one. There's a TED talk, or a TED Salon talk by a woman called Julia Dahr, and her Democratic supporting father went into the heart of Trump country post the 2016 election, and he wanted to get accommodation and understanding from his fellow citizens who'd voted in a way that he couldn't understand. And what he said was, he listened to what they said, and he said, I never really thought about it that way before. What can you share with me that would help me see what you see? And he quickly found that brought them together in a very practical and tangible and human way. And then, of course, there's just one more thing.
Oh, sir. Just one more thing.
So Columbo, some of you may remember Columbo, the 70s detective, bumbling detective, never got any answers right. He would say, just one more thing, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you? The Columbo question is used by journalists all the time to get the true story, by doctors to find out why we have really come to the doctor's surgery. As we're putting on our coat, as our hand is on the door, anything else I can help you with? Oh, actually, do you know what? And it's not the ingrowing toenail, it's the cough that won't go away. So that's about questions. Now, here's a picture of the Queen. This is in 1975. My stepfather, Patrick, there, no longer, neither of them around anymore. The Queen's question that she always asked was, and what do you do? And she was absolutely allowed to ask that question. Now, you might say, as my stepfather, Patrick, did, he turned around and looked up at the Queen and he said, excuse me, Mum, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I think it's a bit obvious. This is glass and I'm engraving it. I'm a glass engraver. Now, I think the Queen apart, and what do you do is not the best icebreaker. So my first question for you that I'd like you to ask using stage chat is, what is the best first question that you ask of a prospective customer to get them interested in you and your business? So that's my first question to you. And I think I'm going to be looking in the stage chat to see what people are saying in terms of questions. So I'll just give you a little time to put some questions in there. And there's a book on offer to the best question. Now, Lucy, my excellent assistant and partner in crime backstage, am I missing seeing questions coming in?
You are indeed. They are on the stage chat.
Okay, I'm on stage.
They're slowly coming in. Everyone's thinking.
Very good, very good, very good. I can see them coming in. You can still hear me all right?
Yes.
Very good. Lovely, Columbo. The best first question. What is it that you're looking to achieve? Very good. Excellent. I like that very much indeed, Charlotte. What's the biggest problem you face in your business? Tell me about your issue. Charlotte, that is also, there's a real sense there. I don't know whether you have any police training or background in there, but that open question, that inviting dialogue is so important. Any more questions? Any tips on getting people to ask hand-on-the-door questions earlier in the conversation rather than at the end? I don't think that's one of your, that's your question. How do we get people to open up? My advice for that is that very much, if we get people to tell their story, if we get people to, if we use open questions, if they feel like they're in the middle of an interrogation. So it's about human and naturalistic dialogue. It's about understanding that they're facing a difficult challenge. So hand on the door questions. It can be frustrating that you have to wait right till the end. I know that some, well, maybe doctors don't find that frustrating, particularly because they only have 10 minutes to run their consultations. But I think open questions and also that position of listen, you know so much about your business. Tell me about, exactly as you say, Charlotte. Actually, I think you've answered your own question by saying, "Tell me about your issue." Doug says, "Could you tell me what you know about your business and what we do?" I like that very much. And Catherine, thank you for this. Tell me what would make your life easier. I think I went on, I think the most profound training course I ever went on was a consultative sales training course. And tell me what would make your life easier. You know, how can I take away your pain? It's called consultative because it's very much like you know, the work that a consultant, but a medical consultant will do. And it's about quickly taking a case history, knowing what you know, but then getting people to own up. Chris says, "Why have you got in touch with us today?" Very nice, very nice. Listen, there's a great array. Keep those questions coming in, and we will make a decision. We'll make a decision at the end of this as to who gets the book. But I've already got an inkling of who may well get this first book. Good. Listen, we're halfway through, and we've got two more sections to go through. Insights will be relatively quick. Storytelling, which I think is really about how you build and sustain your impact and your presence. Very interesting there from James in the chat. We'll come back to that. So in terms of storytelling, data-driven storytelling, how you use data to tell stories, very helpful, very useful. So sourcing genuine insights. The Princeton philosopher Daniel Kahneman. I love this quote from him. I love this picture, not least because it looks like my own cat Quincy, who is sitting on a sofa in my office here today. He says that thinking is to humans as swimming is to cats. They can do it, but they prefer not to. Now, Daniel Kahneman is the man who is responsible. He won the Nobel Prize for economics, behavioral economics in 2002, thanks to a career-long work that he and his collaborator Amos Tversky had done. And what they have helped us to understand is the predictable mistakes that we make in thinking. What we use, because there's so much, not just in the digital age, but actually in the world, there's so much data out there in the world. our senses only take in a microscopic amount of that. And in order for us to survive and to thrive and to avoid being eaten or poisoned or run over, we'll take in the information that we need, but generally no more. But thinking about insight, thinking about how we actually get to understand our customers, our competitors, our colleagues, we've got very little clue about what goes on between our ears. Yes, we know we have this incredible supercomputer. Yes, we know about all of the neurotransmitters and possibly how they interact. But there's also an awful lot that we don't know about thinking, because it's a blancmange like 1.5 kilo, hundreds of billions of neurons with at least 10,000 connections each. We're learning, but we're in the foothills of learning. So thinking about thinking is hard. I'm very much interested in insight, partly because the word insight is so overused in business, but also because if we can get to it, then we can really unlock and we can fly and we can innovate. As I say, for me, insight is the superpower that underpins and drives innovation. Now, as Paddy was saying at the beginning, no business has ever said, I haven't got enough data. And it is from data that we get through, data can coalesce into information and knowledge, and fundamentally to insight. This profound and useful understanding says, so what? This is what the data means. Now what? This is what we can do as a result. Through wisdom and ultimately to impact. Because as businesses, all you want to have is impact. You want to shift the needle. You want more people to know about what you do, more people to buy your products and services. And I think we can go from data to insight to impact. But we need a framework to help the planets align. That's a metaphor that people often use to describe insights, planetary alignment, that these things will line up. Something we knew already, something else we knew already, joined together in a new and surprising way. Old plus old equals new. The Vilfredo Pareto, the Italian philosopher, you'll know him from the 80-20 rule. He said that an idea is nothing more or less than a combination of old ideas. A new idea is nothing more or less than a combination of old things. And sometimes, insights can appear to be blindingly obvious, absolutely blindingly obvious. And so because they appear to be blindingly obvious, we can dismiss them. But they need to be pressure tested, and we need a way of understanding how to get to insight, this profound and useful understanding. Some definitions of insight that I've run training in this area. I was running some yesterday. Meaningful analysis of data and facts, information with benefits, I like. Why it is what it is, the so what outcome of data. An original idea that drives a solution to a problem. I particularly love being able to see round corners, that sort of superpower. What we do with the nuggets we found, deep and accurate understanding, drilling down to the kernel of truth. Integration, alignment, and meshing of data, finding out the truth of something, the undertones of why. I particularly like the undertones of why because it sounds like a kind of progressive rock band from the 1970s, and that happens to be the soundtrack to some of my life. Those are the definitions of insight for me in this insight book. I talk about it, as I say, being a profound and useful understanding of a person, a thing, a situation, or an issue. A nugget of data-driven, evidence-based certainty. Insight helps us understand and think about an issue completely differently, if you'll excuse, with more insight. But it's important to know what insight is not. So insight is not information and data and trends and analytics. They contribute to it. They're not casual observations, however interesting they may be. They're not something with a short shelf life. Proper insight allows us to do something for a meaningful amount of time. They're not a customer desire or a wish. That can lead us to innovate, but that's not what insight is. And they're certainly not. If any of you subscribe to any dashboards, data, or you build your own dashboards, that is an insight that can lead you to insight. This is all fuel in the funnel towards insight. And the structured approach to seeking insights that I advocate, partly because it works, partly because I've helped top 3 global pharma business to change the way that they understand their patients and what it's like to live with their conditions using this model. So I know that it works, and many other businesses use it too. My approach is this, and it has one really unexpected element to it. it's a kind of circular process. So you start with sweat, you start with curiosity. I talked about, the importance of curiosity and asking smarter questions, and unsquashing that 5-year-old, embracing your inner 5-year-old. Analytics, immersion, and experience, but sweat. You really get to the bottom of the brief, the challenge that your customer has. The subversive bit is time out. So I mentioned that analytical thinking and insightful thinking are not the same thing. In analytical thinking, we do not have, thank you, Charles, needs insight into a good local bookkeeper. I'm sure there'll be somebody to help you. Time out is not necessary in analytical thinking. If we're looking to solve a problem, we need to apply brain power. But insightful thinking, to allow old and old to combine to make something new, really matters. Fortunately, many of our jobs allow us to go and work on something else, to do expenses, to do timesheets, to work on another client. But it's really important to allow your subconscious mind to combine the information you've generated through this sweat phase or experience, to combine it in unexpected and sometimes unusual ways. And then we need to know what it feels like emotionally, intellectually, physiologically, when we have a moment of insight, capture that and then improve, test it early, rather than think that it's something that we should polish and polish and polish. So if you think you've got an insight, go and talk to your clients early, go and talk to your colleagues early. So that's the model that is in this insight book. And I just want to give you a way of thinking about it. There are lots of ways to write insights. This happens to be the one that I favor because it's got this interesting causal connection and a consequence to it. And I'll give you 3 examples from diverse areas. This template for writing insights. Statement 1, because of statement 2, which means consequence. So 3 examples. Dove, Unilever's beauty brand, campaign for real beauty, running for more than 15 years now. This insight is known as real types, not stereotypes. Many women don't like how they're portrayed by the beauty industry because most women don't have the size 0 figures like those that dominate fashion press advertising and photo shoots, which means low self-esteem, with women really rarely describing themselves as beautiful. Now, that last bit, which means, is a piece of cross-cultural research that Unilever did in 20 markets, and they discovered that in 20 markets around the world, Russia, India, China, Brazil, UK, France, America, only 2% of women were spontaneously using the word beauty to describe themselves, hence the campaign for real beauty, hence the beauty industry taking itself on from the inside. And if you look at the way that fashion press advertising and plus size models and all varieties of models are in the fashion press these days, they have helped to, not single-handedly, they have helped to change that narrative from within. Here's one from Always, Procter & Gamble, sanitary protection, like a girl. Again, a data-driven insight. And they wanted to reclaim the phrase like a girl. Girls' self-esteem drops twice as fast as boys during puberty. And that's, again, cross-cultural research that demonstrates that. Because gender stereotypes label some activities as male and heroic, while others are seen as weak and girly, which means being a girl and being raised a girl can be seen as second best. And they've got a campaign which I'm sure you will have seen, all about Like a Girl and why Like a Girl is something to be so proud of, which has led them to have a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of interesting publicity, but has also enabled them to bond young teenage girls into their brand universe, because they're standing up for that. And then lastly, I'll give you a left field one. I'm sure most of us have some of these little highlighter pens on our desk. I think I can see 15 on mine. Highlight the remarkable. So what Stabilo did was they literally highlighted remarkable people, in this case, remarkable women, who were behind some of the world's biggest discoveries, who'd been written out of history. And this insight, national and global historical narratives often don't tell the story of what really happened. Because history has traditionally been written by men, about men, for the next generation of men, which means women's role in history has been understated. So that's my formula. Those examples, you can apply this in many, many, many different ways. My second question for you now is, can you tell me in the stage chat, which company, brand, or business leader do you believe is particularly insightful and why? Who has a real understanding? And I'm going to steal one from you. And that is Branson, Richard Branson. I think many people would say Richard Branson. But you can give me national figures. You can give me very, very local figures. One of the things that I love doing when I run this training and give talks about this around the world is that you find very often that there are real local heroes and heroines who have profound understandings. Charles is giving us Elon Musk. I think Elon Musk is a fascinating character, a Tony Stark type character. I don't even think he's in the transportation business. I think he's in the electricity business, and he uses vehicles that are designed for the 21st century as a means of distribution. Ray Dalio. That's a really interesting one. Another one from Charles. Thank you, Charles. Those are really, really interesting examples. People or businesses. Think about brands. Think about, I've given you that example of Dove and the campaign for real beauty. Are there brands that you think, God, they really, really understand me? Maybe in the way that they use data. Some of the streaming services you might feel they really understand you. Just as you finished one box set, another one is served. You think, do you know what? That is very interesting. Ramona Dyson, innovation, expertise, and perfection. Something of previously a local hero. Really, really interesting. And able to charge an absolute premium for innovating and providing products absolutely top of the range. Some would say that Apple have done similar things. If you looked at my desk, you might think that was true. Rachel Flanagan, Mrs. Bucket Cleaning Services from Adam. That is a fantastic example. I'm not sure whether Mrs. Bucket Cleaning Services is a national or a local player, but I would like to know, Adam, if you wouldn't mind writing a little bit more and saying why Rachel Flanagan from Mrs. Bucket Cleaning Services is one. Spotify annual listening stats. Lucy, that's a very, very good example. I love that example. It always reminds me that actually I do like dad rock. It's strange. Very odd that I thought that I was listening to something more cutting edge this year. Dan, you give us Jeff Bezos. I think Jeff Bezos is really interesting. Really interesting. Not only in terms of if you go back to 1995 and the online bookstore and people being a bit sniffy and dismissive, particularly the offline bookstores, but that wasn't what he was about at all in terms of all of the categories. But also, Amazon Web Services, because they were having to scale, they power a huge part of the internet. Stephen Bartlett, love his podcast and his guest. Nice, Porter. I like that very much. Very good. Now, Adam, I'm intrigued to know more about Mrs. Bucket Cleaning Services. But that's really that's a very, very interesting array. And keep those coming in. Keep those coming in. And I'm taking a note about who. So Adam says she's totally changed the perception of the cleaning industry from starting her own business. Brilliant. I will absolutely, Adam, go and check out her, because I think I'm aware of somebody locally here who's maybe copying her model. Anna Winter from Letitia. Absolutely. I think she's. I mean, interestingly, I have a 19-year-old son who's just started at university, and while I was away at a conference last month, he's very interested in fashion, and he and my wife went to Paris for a couple of days, and they were looking at all sorts of different places to buy fashion. They didn't buy anything, but had a lovely time in the Balenciaga store. They were treated like royalty, even though there was no chance of them buying anything. They were buying stuff at vintage markets. But the thing I thought was interesting is they came back from Paris with a copy of Vogue, and this was the first. I was amazed in 2022, the first copy of Vogue to feature a man as a standalone model on the cover of Vogue, and that was Timothée Chalamet. I like your laughing with tears. I presume that's the Balenciaga story. Right, let us, in the last 15 minutes, whiz through telling better stories. We've talked about asking the right questions to get the right insights. Now, data storytelling, which will be absolutely at the heart. Good point, Hugh. That's Body Shop, Big Issue, Anita Roddick, a local heroine down here. Better stories. So storytelling, story and story structure is what drives us, is what gets us to think about the world and to make sense of the world. So let's go around this picture here. circle time, golden hour, whatever it's called in school and preschool in reception year. We make sense of stories from the world as soon as we can structure speech. That's what we use to make sense of the world. Going to the top right, we've got this campfire. The Latin word for fireplace is focus. Think how we focus our attention around the leaping flames. This is a cricket tour of the Isle of Wight I was on, the stories that were told that came out of the flames. To the bottom right, office gossip, I'm told, sometimes can lubricate what it's like to be in a business. Probably none of yours, I'm sure. The box sets that we watch. Mine happens to be The Sopranos, not because I want to become a mafia boss, not because I'm particularly having a midlife crisis that needs therapy, but I'm interested in the dynamics there. The boxes, I don't want to be Jon Snow. I don't want to be either of the couple in Ozark, but I'm making sense of my life through what people in another dimension, another experience are doing. And in the bottom left, the guy sitting in the blue hat and the blue jalaba, he's in the Jam El Fnar, the main square in Marrakesh, and he turns up at 7 o'clock every night. And he tells, well, my Arabic is almost non-existent. I can't tell you what stories he tells, but what he tells is the next installment of, let's call it Marrakesh, EastEnders or Emmerdale. He gets a crowd of 250, 300 locals coming to hear what his next story is going to be. Story structure is what we use to make sense of the world. Last classical reference, promise. Aristotle, the 4th century philosopher in Athens, he wrote a book called The Poetics, looking at the 3 forms of entertainment that existed in 4th century Athens: comedy, tragedy, and epic poetry. And he mapped out this 3-act story structure, what we might think of as the beginning, the middle, and the end. He called it the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis, the bringing together. And that's what underpins all brilliant storytelling. Now, that can be an email, a business proposal, a presentation, a meeting. Think about that structure. Aristotle also said that we need to have 3 elements to any great story. He talked about ethos, credibility. Well, you have the credibility because you run these brilliant businesses. You're doing business brilliantly. You've solved similar problems for other companies. Pathos, emotion. It's about real human potential and about how we unlock that potential. And then finally, logos, the logic, the data, the statistics. But you need to balance those, and I'll explain it more in a little bit more detail about why you need to balance those. It's really important that you're telling those human stories. We make our decisions emotionally. Kahneman, who I quoted with cats earlier on, his work shows we make our decisions emotionally using the ancient part of the brain that has no access to data, no access to language, but we then justify them rationally. Dan Pink, the American business writer, says that we're all in the moving business, the business of persuading others to take action. To buy or not to buy, very, very important. But there's a however in the world of big data. 3 howevers, perhaps. It's too noisy. We suffer from continuous partial attention, particularly those that we're selling to. And, we live in a world of fake news and post-truth, so does it even matter? Have we had enough of experts? Well, I think the last 2 years have shown that expertise simply portrayed means that actually we do need data and evidence to back up and underpin, but not dominate our stories. I wish this was my phrase: from Gutenberg to Zuckerberg, from the invention of the printing press in the late 15th century to the mid-20 teens. The amount of data that we created as a species would fill iPads stretching to the moon by the end of 2015. And by the end of 2016, the same again. Never, as Paddy said at the beginning, it's not that we don't have enough data, it's how do we wade through that? Well, I've shown you the questions. I've shown you how the questions to data gives you insight. Now we'll move on to the stories. Maurice Sarchi, advertising guru of 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. He said, how can a teenager in 30 seconds of a TV commercial take a call, send a text, receive a photo, play a game, do all of these things? They call it continuous partial attention. You, your colleagues, your clients, your prospects, all suffer. There's so much information out there, they suffer from continuous partial attention. So if you overdo or use data too heavily in your storytelling, you're going to get people to turn off, be that on screen, be that in person, be that in communication. And then lastly, well, fake news, post-truth, absolutely. I think the pandemic has shown us that, well, they've shown us how not to communicate data and how to communicate data in an effective and simple way. there are some heroes and villains. That would be an entirely different keynote to take you through that. But I think we absolutely do need fact and evidence in this difficult time that we live in, this volatile, uncertain time, ambiguous time that we live in. Two books here, the same quote in both books. Numbers don't speak for themselves. There was a thought that with the explosion of big data, the numbers spoke for themselves. But Nate Silver in his book, The Signal of the Noise, said the numbers have no way of speaking for themselves. We speak for them. We imbue them with meaning. Now, data storytellers like me, and there aren't many people. Thank you, Paddy, for liking my job self-described job title. They don't have data storytellers like me, but also people in every marketing department, in every social media department, in every communications department, indeed across the knowledge economy, across the economy, we are all data storytellers, more or less. And it's important that we use numbers in the right way and give them the meaning. So I'm going to give you quickly 6 golden rules for better data storytelling. The first is about knowing your audience, both using data to understand who they are and understanding their likely data tolerance. If you're talking to a year 6 primary school group, if you're talking to a chief financial officer's team, if you're talking to a marketing conference, well, you know, there's different levels of data tolerance. So know your audience and use data to help to understand that. Mark Twain, Oscar Wilde, Winston Churchill, and the French mathematician Blaise Pascal are all said to have said, "I would have written you a shorter letter, I just didn't have the time." In data storytelling and keeping it simple yet smart, using only the most important data points to pique people's interests and get them to say, "That's interesting, tell me more," is the way to do it. The way not to do it is to drown them with information, drown them with data, give them so much unfiltered, unrefined data that they just feel they need to give in, because they will just go somewhere else to somebody who doesn't do that. Number 3, the curse of knowledge. Steve Pinker, the Harvard psychologist, in this lovely book, The Sense of Style, The Thinking Person's Guide to Writing in the 21st Century, he describes the curse of knowledge of the difficulty in imagining what it's like for someone else not to know something that you know. The difficulty in imagining what it's like for someone else not to know something that you know. And I think it's really, if you're expert in your area, as you all are, it's very difficult to put yourself into the mindset, the shoes of those who you're selling to, who you're going to be working with. You only need to give them a little bit. You need to ask them those questions that allow you to understand, and not say, "We've got this amazing algorithm which will be able to. We've got this fantastic new cleaning product which can," because it's made of these different things. Give the information gently, be invited to give more, and beware that curse of knowledge. Find and use relevant data. It's very important, as I say, not to drown people in too much data. At the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, you may remember Maria Ovisanikova, the woman at the back with the banner, came on screen, and there's a website called Tortoise Media, the slow news movement, who their daily email had these 6 words: 250 million viewers, 5 seconds, 15 years. That's how many people around the world would see Russia's Channel 1. Maria was on screen for 5 seconds, and she was sentenced to 15 years. Well, actually, that's just been overturned, but she was initially sentenced to 15 years hard labor in Siberia. Really relevant data. What a reach, tiny action, massive consequence. Find and use relevant data. The last 2 are really about empathy, and the whole thing actually is about empathy. Balancing the rational and the emotional. Or rather, maybe the other way around, because we make our decisions emotionally and we justify them rationally. Remember that your storytelling needs to be real and human. And then finally, talk human. Use emotion, use real case histories, show how your products and services have helped people to genuinely change the way that they do things. So knowing your audience, keeping it simple, being aware of the curse of knowledge, finding and using relevant data, balancing the rational and the emotional, talking human. My last question for you, my last book award here. What is the one number that you would use to sell your business to me, and why? What is the one number that you would use to sell you? What's the killer statistic? What's the most important data point that you have in your business about the transformation that you can bring, about the way that you're able to change the lives of those that you work with? It can be very, very, very simple. it can be complicated. But, simplicity, as you'll have seen, and empathy are very important elements. So I'll allow you to start typing those, and then I'm going to flip on, because we're nearly to time. I've got a couple of last messages that I'd like to give you. What is the one number about your business, about the transformation that your business, the products and services that you use, that you believe would be the real compelling data point? And as I say, there are prizes at stake here. I've already got a good idea about who's going to be getting the first two, but do you have any numbers that really sum up your business? I'm not sure. Yeah, very well, Lucy. Definitely think about it. Definitely think about the killer statistic that you have for your business. Listen, because we're coming close to time, I will let you. I'll let you think about that question. Paula, thank you for putting that into the chat. And do please put it in. Adam, 70% of managers are thinking about leaving their job in the next 12 months. So, Adam, I'm presuming, I don't know you, but I'm presuming that you work in the HR space potentially, or you're going to be helping either to fill those gaps or to help people move on. That sort of puts the great resignation of the COVID era kind of into perspective. 80% of SMEs don't have a strategy. Google reviews X numbers speak for themselves. SMEs who use language services have 30% greater export success. And I have absolutely no doubt that is true. That's really, really, really interesting. They're coming in thick and fast. Listen, I'm going to keep those coming in. I've got a view. I've got a view there. SMEs who use have got greater export success. Very good. So, just seeing if any more have come in. Right. Let me sum up, because I know you have a busy and packed day. 39% of small firms have had a data breach or a cyber hack, says Ellen. I just need one customer per day, per month, per week, says Keith. Let's sum up here then. So if you're going to use data better, in order to enhance your business presence, I think you need to ask smarter questions that will give you the data that allow you to be more insightful and tell those data-driven stories. Using data to do business brilliantly. You ask smarter questions to get the right data. That'll help you to scope market opportunities. Absolutely. Current and new. Using data to surface and articulate insights. You can understand competitors, clients, colleagues better. Craft data-driven human stories to attract and retain your customers as customer advocates, ultimately. I've just seen we reduced the flow of energy during peak times by 97%, averting blackouts in the national grid using dirtier and more expensive fuel sources from Hugh. Thank you, Hugh. They're still coming. Seeing, the reason I had these two heads merge, seeing the world from the other person's point of view. Not selling what you're selling, but getting them to buy what you have. It does all come down to empathy, that ability to put ourselves into the mind, the mindset, the shoes of those that we're looking to influence. I would strongly encourage you to apply these principles, these universal principles of asking smarter questions, of curiosity, open-mindedness, preparation, openness, simplicity, and listening. And of course, embrace your inner Socrates. Your inner Socrates of starting from the position that all that you know is that you know nothing. Ask smarter questions. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. The books go to Charlotte is Asking Smarter Questions. Adam is How to Be Insightful. Sarah is going to be Narrative by Numbers. Lucy, Paula, I'll get those books to you, and if you could distribute them on. I think that's an hour and 45 seconds, 3 minutes before your break. That's all from me.
That's fantastic, Sam. Thank you very much indeed. Paul and I were just sitting here while you were talking. We thought your presentation was great. We love the way you actually communicated it, which is all the essence of what you're talking about it. We love the way you made references to different parts of the program coming up as well. So you made all of your story relevant to today's experience, as well as getting people thinking. So thank you very much indeed. I love the idea about learning to think about thinking. in one of my earlier careers, I was a teacher and heavily involved in thinking skills. And I would just love to have more thinking and philosophy in schools. It will make us a better population. So it's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Much appreciated.
My very great pleasure.